Welcome back, Spare Parts Army. I'm your average infantryman, Chris Cappy. The FX-05 Xiuhcoatl is Mexico's latest primary rifle that has been steadily filling the ranks of their armed forces since 2006. This was the same year that Mexico's former president Felipe Calderon initially launched their country's war on drugs. And so by July 2019, approximately 155,000 FX-05 rifles have been produced, with plans to scale up production even more. We'll see how the FX-05 was created at the perfect moment to be on the front lines of Mexico's battle against the cartel. When it's not fighting, troops use it to battle their oldest foe, boredom. But what made Mexico decide to research and manufacture their own rifle, rather than simply import an already existing design? Why is it more well suited than their previous heavy old G3? And is all of the controversy that it's just a clone of the German HK G36 actually true? Or is it different once you pop open the hood? Without Raid Shadow Legends, I'd still be living in my dad's 2006 Camry. Raid's 4th anniversary is finally here, and there's a ton to get excited about. I'm talking dedicated offers, free gifts, promo codes, events, and a brand new Fusion event where you guys can get your hands on an anniversary-themed legendary champion. I know you probably think there's no way I actually play Raid, but the truth is I got hooked when I was forced to play it for a sponsorship years ago. So I downloaded it that one time thinking I would just delete it right afterwards, and I've been reluctantly playing it ever since. But it's a fun way to pass time when I'm at the airport or traveling, when my family's begging me to pay attention to them instead. They were one of our very first sponsors supporting us. If you haven't already started playing Raid yet, then what are you waiting for? Use my link in the description or scan my QR code to get insane bonuses. We're talking an epic champion, Kellen the Shrike, and other useful things. Additionally, all new and existing players can get a bunch of free birthday gifts. Just enter the promo code 4YearsRaid. Download Raid Shadow Legends by clicking the link in the description below or scanning the QR code in the corner of the screen. Mexico's early history with small arms helps explain why they want their own in-house weapon. They trace their roots back to the old munitions factory of 1885, where they supplied ammo for their forces. But by the turn of the century, Mexico lacked the industrial base at the time to manufacture the designs to a consistent standard. Mexican General Mondragon contracted SIG in Switzerland to produce 4,000 of their M1908 rifles. However, when the Mexican Revolution kicked off in 1910, only about 1/10 of the original contracted weapons made it to them. Only 400 of the semi-auto rifles were successfully delivered before the revolution interrupted the deal. So already we can see why it's advantageous to produce your own firearms, so you're not blindsided when foreign weapons shipments are prevented from arriving in an emergency. Since the Mexican Revolution, the country has found itself dependent on imports or licenses from other nations for their small arms needs. This has led to a variety of different models from different manufacturers, equipping the complex mix of military and police agencies throughout. So they lack standard calibers and rifles, which are necessary to standardize training. The country finally settled on the HK G3 as their main rifle. The weapon was invented in 1958 and was used by the Mexican military until around 2006. But why did Mexico need to change from the G3 and end up with the FX-05 at this point? Well, until 2006, the official rifle of the Mexican Army has been a license-produced version of HK's G3A3 battle rifle. And they still use it to some degree today. It's a venerable weapon on the battlefield that fires the powerful 7.62 by 51mm NATO round. The G3 series of rifles are reliable and accurate weapons, but follow an old model of combat weapons that stress long-range punch over close-quarters capability. So the G3 had the downside of being unwieldy at 10 pounds and 40 inches long. As Mexico continues to urbanize, they increasingly find themselves battling it out with drug cartels in buildings and narrow streets. We'll see how the homegrown weapons design is uniquely created with combating Mexico's enemies in mind. Mexican police and military forces have started to prefer to use the smaller 5.56mm NATO weapons, like the M4 imported from the US and limited numbers of the HK-33 license-produced in Mexico. This leads us to why their cartel fears this new weapon so much. The military wanted to switch to the 5.56 cartridge, even though it is less powerful than the larger 7.62 round. The trade-off, though, allows for a much handier weapon in tight quarters, with lower recoil and better controllability during auto fire. This allows Mexican infantry to lay down a much higher volume of fire against cartel sicarios. The Mexican army has very non-interventionist foreign policy and avoids wars outside their own country. The FX-05 is the right and practical choice for their forces, who will be engaged in these kind of urban close quarters fights around 300 meters and below. There's also allegedly less of a chance of the 5.56 round over-penetrating and hitting bystanders when compared to the 7.62 bullet, a major concern in urban environments. But getting a weapon with the new caliber wouldn't be easy. So what happened was in the early 2000s, Mexico sought to standardize its military arms by negotiating a license to produce the HK-556 G36 within their country. So they came extremely close to working out a deal with HK where they would license these German G36. But then the Mexican government squashed that deal at the last minute and instead decided to research and develop their own brand new weapon, leading to the FX-05. Xiuhcoatl, the name of the rifle, roughly translates from the ancient Aztec word for fire serpent. You can even see there's a stamping of a fire serpent directly on the rifle. The Mexican military knows how to do branding. In 2006, at the 196th anniversary of the Republic, the parade provided the first look at their brand new homemade FX-05 Xiuhcoatl rifle right off the production line. The Mexican Special Forces Air Mobile Group were equipped with it in that parade. Here you can start to understand why having your own weapon produced within your country is a sign of national pride. The FX-05 is also very cost effective, with an estimated price for the Mexican military of only around $575 per unit. 2006 was the same year that former President Cauldron ordered thousands of troops onto the streets to respond to cartel violence in the nation. It was a controversial move, and since 2006, Mexico's defense budget has doubled to $5.6 billion. The government policy was to decapitate the cartel leadership, focusing on eliminating high-value targets. They also deployed thousands of military soldiers to patrol the streets. This kind of action lends itself to a lightweight FX-05 weapon when you're carrying it around on 4 to 8 hour long patrols. The Washington Post reported that Mexican officials say they need to make their military the core of their security policy instead of their police. They claim the military is the only group with the necessary discipline and weaponry to destroy the country's dangerous criminal groups. Meanwhile, Cauldron continued to increase his anti-drug campaign by 2008. There were about 45,000 Mexican troops involved, along with the state and federal police forces fighting against the cartels, many armed with the FX-05. The government was initially successful in detaining many drug lords. This reportedly sparked a violent reaction from the cartels. The Xiuhcoatl rifle, the Fire Serpent, was very fittingly fighting fire with fire. Since 2006, the FX-05 has seen extensive use in the war on drugs, with many successes against the cartels. But aside from the cartel, there was another problem, a legal problem. If you think the new rifle looked exactly like the German HK-G36, well, the German firearms company Heckler & Koch, or Koch, thought the exact same thing. And in 2007, they officially accused the Mexican government of copying their G36V rifle, because there's zero license agreement between the Mexican government and the company of HK, allowing them to build the G36 inside of Mexico themselves. The Mexican government, though, insisted that the weapons might look the same on the outside, but in reality, it's just a superficial cosmetic way. When you dig deeper, they're really different on the inside. And isn't that what life's really about? That's what matters, what's on the inside. So what's the truth here? In 2006, H&K threatened to take the case to International Tribunal Court. They demanded Mexico destroy all existing FX-05 rifles and pay damages to HK. By November 2006, the Mexican military-industrial complex had to stop manufacturing the FX-05 rifles, while an HK representative flew out from Germany to Mexico City to perform a direct hand inspection of the weapon to look for intellectual property theft. What the rep found surprised a lot of people, because at the time, many analysts were certain that it was just a clone of the G36. This might be because the Mexican engineers who were hand-selected for the project were trained in Portugal and France. And while you can make a weapon in your country, the harder part is creating the industrial machines that make the weapon. Very meta. So Mexico purchased the industrial equipment for manufacturing the FX-05 and all the different machines that would be necessary to build the plastic furniture or the housing of the gun from Germany. Okay, is the Mexican military gaslighting me here? I mean, they even got the industrial equipment from Germany. But in 2007, HK dropped the dispute because the representative who inspected the weapon was satisfied that even though it looked like a duck, it did not indeed quack like a duck. Reportedly, FX-05 uses a different gas-operated piston and roller delayed system different from the G36. For a number of reasons, the HK representative found it did not constitute patent infringement, allowing the Mexican government to continue to produce the FX-05. The Mexican military spent the equivalent of only about $5.8 million USD in 2006 on the research phase, including raw material and using only Mexican national equipment and technology in order to produce their prototype of the FX-05. The Search and Development Technological Military Industry Center was responsible for all of the work over an incredibly short period of time. It only took 16 months. It's taken the US military over 3 years to design and test their rifle. Not a one-to-one comparison by any means, just a point of reference. When we look at the specifications of the FX-05 assault rifle, they're indeed very similar to G36. It weighs about the same at 8.6 pounds and fires at a maximum rate of 750 rounds per minute when firing in full send mode. So far, they're about the same. It has a stated effective range of 800 meters and has a Picatinny-style rail on the top of the receiver that can accept iron sights, carrying handle with an integrated optical sight, or accept common Western optics. That max firing range is by the book the same max firing range as the G36, even though it's likely lower than that in practice. But there's another major difference from the G36. The FX-05 is one of the very few assault rifles in the world to feature polygonal rifling, a feature that the Mexican army seemed to like from their old HK-G3 that they'd been using for decades. Traditional rifles use square-shouldered cuts down the length of the barrel that twist and induce a spin on the bullet to stabilize it in flight. Polygonal rifling instead uses a smoother hexagonal or octagonal profile to do the job, which produces a better seal to keep the propellant gases behind the bullet, producing better and more consistent muzzle velocities, which leads to better accuracy. So the FX-05 is also part HK-G3. This type of rifling is also purported to reduce friction, leading to better barrel life and less copper fouling, while also increasing accuracy and barrel stiffness. There are ongoing debate among shooters about how true these claims are versus traditional rifle profiles, but Glock, Heckler & Koch or Koch, and other European manufacturers have all used polygonal rifles in their designs for years. Mexico has always insisted that the new rifle is a result of a totally national move, and time seems to have shown that they were telling the truth. The weapon is different on the inside. Despite this fact, there was a major political fallout behind the scenes for General Oropeza, who was in charge of the project and had been next in line to become former President Calderon's Secretary of National Defense. General Oropeza was passed over for promotion because of this controversy. Whether he was in the right or wrong, it was simply too much heat, scrutiny, and controversy. We've actually seen this sort of thing play out before with other weapons that look externally very similar, but internally are a different design. Colt and HK actually had their own legal spat when HK was introducing what would eventually become the HK-416, with Colt claiming the weapon was actually a clone of their M16 rifles that they already had a patent for. In the case of the FX-05, the Mexican rifle uses a long stroke gas piston for its action that is more similar to an AK than the short stroke gas piston used by the G36. The FX-05 also has a side-mounted charging handle instead of a top centerline charging handle found on the German rifle. Still, Mexico redesigned parts of the exterior to better differentiate the weapon from the G36, though you have to admit, even with the changes, you can clearly see the inspiration from HK's famous rifle. The reported reason for keeping it so similar looking was to reduce additional training time for their soldiers and for compatibility of a higher percentage of parts and magazines that they were already using with the G36, reducing repair costs. So why did the Mexican military-industrial complex choose to make their own weapon? Part of the reason might have been the high cost of the G36 series, with the license for 30,000 units projected to be around 63 million euros in 2016. By contrast, the initial startup costs for the FX-05 in Mexico were only about 5.8 million euros. However, the new factory line in Mexico did reportedly have problems meeting their target production numbers, and there were reports that there are quality issues with the stainless steel alloy of the barrels, leading to reliability issues and shorter than expected barrel life. So why go through all of the trouble and teething problems of inventing a new rifle versus buying one already made? Mexico already buys tons of weapons from the US and other nations that are cheaper than the G36. So why not go with those mature platforms? Obviously, national pride has a lot to do with it, but beyond bragging rights, there are strategic reasons for investing in a home-built arms industry. Reducing reliance on foreign industries and goodwill is something militaries are always keen to do. It lowers the chance that a nation's primary arms supply will dry up in the event of a war or other calamity when they need the supply line the most. Opening up new arms factories that is 100% domestic is a huge investment into a nation's population that stimulates Mexico's economy, simplifies logistics, develops technical expertise, and can pay dividends in the long run. That return on a lot of initial startup costs. Even when licensed producing a foreign weapon in domestic factories, countries have to pay royalties back to the foreign company and are reliant on them for spare parts, product updates, and abiding by international arms export treaties. In the FX-05 case, building the rifle and its parts entirely in Mexico opened up a factory that has steadily grown over the years to a maximum capacity of 30,000 rifles per year, with all of the industrial infrastructure and employment in the region that comes with it. Reportedly, the FX-05 is created in a factory in Naucalpan de Juarez, Mexico State, where 400 soldiers are in charge of the assembly of the weapon's 112 separate components. Another reason is one you might not expect, because Mexico wanted the ability to separate the weapon distinctly for the army instead of using the same gear and equipment that many police and paramilitary forces use. This gave them better security and control over its use. Mexico has been battling drug cartels and their associated gangs for decades, and the nature of this clash means there's a lot of corruption and infiltration by criminal elements into the country's security services. Military and police weapons are unfortunately found in cartel hands every day, shooting back at the service members that those arms are meant to protect, or harming innocents and bystanders in an ongoing campaign. The cartel wishes they could get their hands on the FX-05, as they reportedly use every opportunity they can to attempt to steal them. A recent video released by War Noir on Twitter shows the cartels capturing the FX-05 from Mexican National Guard soldiers. The Santa Rosa de Lima cartel has released video of them holding what looks like a captured FX-05 threatening the Mexican armed forces. The General Directorate of Military Industry of the Army, which is the government arm in charge of designing and producing the FX-05, wanted a rifle issued specifically to the Army whose parts and components could be strictly controlled by the government. By carefully keeping track of every component and rifle, from the time it's produced to when it comes back to the armory each day, Mexico aims to combat the problem of the government weapons ending up in cartel hands. Details are sketchy, but there are reports that the FX-05 stamps fired casings with information on the rifle to track unauthorized use. By July 2019, 155,000 units of the FX-05 have been produced and have been fighting Mexico's ongoing war against cartels and crime, as well as being issued to Mexican armed forces abroad during peacekeeping or international aid missions. Like in 2016, when the Mexican Army and its FX-05 deployed to Haiti after Hurricane Matthew devastated the island nation. Mexico's General Directorate of Military Industry has built not just a rifle, but an entire modern small arms industry around the FX-05, with plans to open an even larger factory at the Oriental Military Camp in Puebla, as well as introducing a submachine gun variant, which I think is designated the PAX 100, and even reportedly a 50 cal anti-material version in the works. Due to the tight controls of the weapon and its exclusive use by the Mexican Armed Forces, it remains one of the lesser-known assault rifles of the world. However, the Mexican military was careful to build the weapon to NATO standards and designed a lot of the modularity so the weapon can still accept modern accessories like optics, night vision sights, lights, and aiming modules used by Mexico's allies. The Army has been steadily replacing its stock of G3 rifles with the FX-05, and despite some early teething problems, appears to be quite happy with its current performance. As production continues to ramp up, the cartels and gangs of Mexico could be facing more and more advanced military opposition, and hopefully the FX-05 can help bring about peace through superior firepower.